afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to warmly welcome you to our NAWO New South Wales Zoom event today. My name is Diane Utateo and I am a member of the NAWO New South Wales Committee, and I'll be facilitating the panel discussion today. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're participating in this event today, right across Australia. I'm in Sydney, so I'm on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging leaders. And I'd also like to warmly welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who are joining our webinar today. So before we get started, I'd like to just go through a few housekeeping points. Okay, so first and foremost, just a little bit of self-care. Some of you are working back in the workplace, others of you are working from home. So wherever you are, just take a moment to reset. Turn your phone off and be present, and take some time and invest in yourself over this next hour. From an online administration perspective, if you're having any connectivity issues, suggestion is to just close down any applications or windows you don't need. If you do find yourself having difficulties, log out and come back in using the same link. And we are recording the session today, the discussion today. So if all else fails, just check our website and you'll be able to catch up on the discussion later. Your participation is really valued today, and we do ask that you ask questions through the Q&A function. You can actually up your questions by using the thumbs up icon. And so the questions you most want asked, please just upvote and they will go to the top. We're using the chat function today purely to make comments on the discussion. And just a reminder, just to be sensitive to others and be mindful not to be too judgmental in your feedback, please. We'll aim to get to as many questions as we can, and sit back, enjoy the conversation, and thank you for joining us. So again, a big welcome to all NAWO members here today, and I'd especially like to welcome those who are new to NAWO. This might be your first webinar, so a very special welcome to you. NAWO is more than a membership association. It's a community of like-minded organisations, men and women who want their operations to benefit from the full range of talent, both available and emerging. And as you can see, our membership is a who's who of the top organisations in Australia. We'd specifically like to thank Orica, our host today, and I know that we have many Orica employees on the line today, so very warm welcome. And to all our member companies for supporting NAWO and enabling events such as this to come to life. So the title of our discussion today is, do I need an MBA to fast track my career? This is a really difficult question, and one we know that a lot of people are grappling with at the moment. However, what we do know is that there are many pathways to career success. So today we're going to introduce you to 3 high-performing guest speakers from Orica who will share their insights into their different career journeys and the formal and informal educational experiences and professional development that has led them to where they are today. We'll explore how they've leveraged their transferable skills and some of the barriers that they've had to overcome and maybe are still facing. And we hope these stories will inspire you to think more broadly about the different learning opportunities that are available to you today. So don't forget to log your questions into the Q&A section of the toolbar. And I'd now like to introduce you to Pauline Sullivan, the Senior Manager of Capability with Orica, who are our host today, just to say a few words. Over to you, Pauline. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks to NAWO for actually partnering with us for an interesting topic that we've got for you today. Just wanted to introduce myself. So Pauline Sullivan, as Diane said, or capability. So I look after that for all of Orica across the APA region and look after talent acquisition, talent management, and learning and development. Today, for those who aren't familiar with Orica, just giving you a quick snapshot of what we do at Orica. So we've had over 145 years in the industry sector of drill and blast. More than 12,000 employees work with us globally, and over 200 plus technologists who actually work on a number of interesting projects that we've got going from a technology base and some of our customers would be familiar with the likes of WebGen. Our revenue for FY19 was over 5.8 mil. And we're operating in five major technical centres as well. We actually support a number of marketing solutions across a number of different industry sectors, such as surface coal, surface metal, agriculture, and also construction, open mines, and oil and gas. But if we're actually looking at how we partner with NAWO, it comes down to our charter values. So if I can get for you to go through to the next slide. Thank you. So the relationship that we have with NAWO is pretty much in regards to how we support our people and the journey that we have together. So NAWO has provided us with a really great learning platform that we're able to leverage through their webinars, such as something that we're doing today, the articles and thought leadership, and the network and connections that we have across the two organisations. And if we look at our charter values, it looks like it resonates really well with how we succeed together. And for that, it's really important to have this relationship to really get in front of what's going out there in other industry sectors, and also to be at the forefront of ongoing thinking. This webinar is an opportunity to further develop and explore what we're looking at from a learning perspective as well. And everybody's learning journey is different. And today, 3 of our people at Orica are going to share that learning journey, and I hope you get to enjoy the experience. Thanks, Diane, and thanks to NAWO for allowing us to host this session today.
Great, thank you so much, Pauline. So it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our panel of talented leaders from Orica. We have Annie Lakem, Kylie Brough, and Laurie Goodacre. And I'm just going to read through each of their bios to just give you a bit of background. So Annie is currently the production manager at Kooragang Island, the ammonium nitrate manufacturing site. Annie joined Orica in 2013 after moving from Canada via New Caledonia to Australia, and has a degree in chemical engineering from the University of Sherbrooke in Canada. Annie's worked across the petrochemical, industrial minerals and mining industries, and currently manages a multidisciplinary team of operators to engineers, ensuring plant operations are safe and productive within budget. And is passionate about inclusion and diversity, and is a strong advocate of women in non-traditional roles, and is currently on the Women in Engineering Committee and Diversity and Inclusion Committee with Orica. And is spending time with her daughter and partner, and loves the outdoors and doing yoga. Welcome, Annie. Kylie, our next guest is Kylie Brough. Kylie is currently the manager of the AusPac Business Development Team, managing key customer contracts and relationships while seeking new opportunities to deliver growth to Orica. Kylie's been with Orica since 2009 and has a business degree from the University of Newcastle. As a sales professional for over 20 years, Kylie's worked with various consumer goods companies with well-known brands such as Clorox, or Glad as we know them, Heinz and Yates, and having joined Orica from a non-mining background, she's held both commercial and operational roles. Kylie's passionate about working with Orica and the enormous opportunities Orica offer their employees. And as mum of 2 young children, she enjoys spending time outdoors, at the beach, skiing in winter, and the occasional game of golf when she has time. Warm welcome to you, Kylie. And last but certainly not least, Laurie Goodacre. As a territory manager in the West Metals region, Laurie's responsible for ensuring the safe and efficient delivery of explosives and services to over 20 customers. Glad we're in good hands with you, Laurie. Overseeing an $80 million portfolio, Laurie's responsibilities include the commercial tendering and negotiation process and day-to-day operational and customer management. So Laurie joined Orica in 2008 and has become an advocate of diversity. This was particularly influenced during his time in Jakarta as an operations manager and Mongolia as country manager, where Laurie was responsible for cross-functional management while ensuring cultural engagement and inclusion. Laurie is committed to self-improvement and is focusing on completing his MBA and his recreational pilot's licence. To relax, you'll find Laurie out for a walk with his furry friend Buddy. Buddy's a groodle. You have to tell us what a groodle is. I don't know, Laurie. Or relaxing with a G&T at his family farm. So a very warm welcome to you, Laurie. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your stories with us. So to kick off, I'd ask each of you if you could briefly tell us a little bit about your career path and how your education, professional and personal development has shaped your careers. And if we could start with you, Annie.
Thank you, Diane. When I was thinking about the subject, I thought what I'll do to help everyone understand, I'll say the 7 kind of key things that helped me through my career. So the first thing is I started my degree in food science, but I changed to chemical engineering because I wanted to have a broader range of potential jobs I could do. And I really, I never regretted that choice because really engineering teach you how to learn, and that's still useful today. The second thing is in Canada, Engineers Canada, when you start as an engineer, you have to do an ethics and integrity mentorship and exam for the first 2 years of your career. And that really shaped how I approach what I'm accountable and responsible for. And I think it has made me who I am today in a certain way. I have always applied that. The third thing is my first 5 years of my career were in oil and gas. And during that 5 years, I didn't focus at all. I was like, I'm just starting. I don't want to focus on climbing up the ladders. I just want to focus on learning. So I accepted any opportunity that was offered to me, any horizontal move. I was just focusing on learning. The fourth thing, after 5 years, I thought it's probably time for a change and I wanted to work overseas. For me, I was thinking it's how you build resilience and courage to put yourself in something you don't know. So I moved to a more engineering firm to go work overseas and do commissioning. So I got moved to New Caledonia, and that role really teach me 3 key things that I still use today. You have to adapt your style to the people you're working with. You have to know where your limits are. And you have to know what you want to do for your career. So while I was there, I really realized I didn't want to do a technical role. I wanted to do more management role. So I asked for a transfer to Australia because I had met a lot of Australians there, and I got a visa for 2 years. I'm still here, so it's been 11 years. So I never left. I became a citizen. But what I learned when I moved to Australia is like, because now I was focused, I wanted to be in a management role. I did a certificate 4 with TAFE in frontline management to learn some leadership skill, but also to make sure my English was up to speed for what I needed. Then I accepted after a few years a role as an operations superintendent. I didn't feel ready for that role, but I was like, it's the chance to do it because it's bringing me closer to management. And then the last one, I asked to go to a leadership summit and they say, get a sponsor, get a mentor. But when I called a guy to like one of the VP to ask, do you want to be my mentor? He's like, you need a sponsor at that stage in your career. Someone that talks about you, not with you. And what that allowed me, so having him talking for me, it opened opportunities. So I got a role, a global role that would probably not have opened. Then when I explained to him what I wanted, he fought for me. So I got the role I'm in now, have been for 2 years. And he also got me into the enterprise leadership program that Orica does every year. And it's only a selected few people, like we were 13 last year to do it. And I think that was going to help me for the future because it built my network. So in conclusion, I think the key thing, get a sponsor, know you're in charge of your own learning, and know what you want to do with your career.
Great. Thanks, Annie. Yes, you've really talked about, how intentional and purposeful you've been about your career and the learning opportunities and the decisions you've made along the way. And great to hear, sponsorship, how powerful and important that is in your career. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, over to you, Kylie. If you could just tell us about your career path, your education, professional and personal development, how it's shaped your career.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, you know, as the sort of the background said, I did a Bachelor of Business degree out of Newcastle, and I majored in marketing back in the day. And if I think back, probably one of those people finishing high school, wasn't quite certain where I wanted to head. I wasn't as defined around, you know, a specific discipline or degree, but we had somebody that came and talked to us around this degree, because it was a relatively new type of degree back when I did it. It's a few years back now. And what it really did was it sort of resonated with me. I knew I wanted to get into business. I just didn't know quite how I would do that. And the degree that I got really gave me a really good foundation to go into the commercial world. So it's a very, you know, quite well-rounded degree with, you know, various majors across a few different disciplines. And through my time, you know, going through university, I could see that that was going to give me the foundation and the building blocks that I needed, and sort of try and then work out where my interests, you know, lay going forward. And what, you know, through doing my degree, I really sort of went down and majored in marketing. So that sort of sales and marketing side of things was really where, you know, I found myself in my comfort zone and where my interests lay. And really from there on, you know, I've pretty much stayed in that sort of sales pathway going forward. First job out of, you know, school, you know, out of uni was, you know, nothing glamorous. A sales representative that sort of, you know, treads the boards inside that the supermarket type environment, and really nothing glamorous, but it was a starting point and really starting to build on all of the, you know, the right sort of communication skills and sales skills that you need to, you know, going forward. So I did that for a few years with a pretty small company. And then really the step change for me came, I joined Clorox. And as you said, they make a couple of the bigger brands, the iconic brands like Glad Wrap and Chucks and Armour All. So, you know, medium sort of size business. And really that's when I sort of, the doors opened and the lights went on, and I could really see where sales and also trying to work out where, you know, did I have an interest in sort of down that product, you know, marketing angle. And so I started as a sort of still in a sales role, went across to a junior product manager's role, sort of tested my skills set there for a few years. Gave me a lot of, you know, grounding around understanding consumers, but really what it kept coming back to me is that I really like the interaction with customers, that face-to-face relationship piece. And through my time there, and I was with them for about 7 years, I moved myself forward into sort of a key account or key sales role. We talk about some of the pivotal things and talk about a sponsor. During that time, I had a really, really key person that probably had more belief in me than I might have had it myself, you know, being still quite young. So he really promoted myself in a few roles and really helped, I don't know, keep fostering that passion and that inspiration for sort of, you know, what got me excited about being in a sales role. But from there, I moved across a couple of companies. I went across to the Heinz Group and then eventually found myself at Yates. And where that led me is Yates was actually a division or a subsidy of Orica, which I had no idea, and, you know, didn't know who our big parent company Orica was, and a mining side of things. So really that's where the world sort of came together. And just personally, we wanted, my husband and I were keen to get out of Sydney and move up into Newcastle and just live a bit more of a less hectic Sydney lifestyle. And that's really what opened the door for me to seek out what's the opportunity within Orica at a mining level. And I think the thing, the light bulb also for me is that, you know, sales skills, customer relationship skills, all of the, you know, the foundation blocks, you know, are transferable, whether, you know, across industries and, you know, across different platforms. So Orica needs people to manage their customers and their key customers. And so that's what enabled me to open that door and move across into the, you know, into the mining space. And really from there, as I said, it's been sort of 12 years with Orica. I've had a fairly wide, you know, through different ways that the organisation has worked. I've had an opportunity to get into more operational roles for a time, as well as staying in sort of a pure customer management and customer relationship side of things. So yeah, my education gave me all of the building blocks, certainly gives you the skills to go forward, but transitioning across industry, that's another challenge. Education doesn't necessarily give you, tell you how to do that. Really that's when you've got to take matters into your own hand, work out how to close that knowledge gap. A little bit about, like what Annie said, mentors versus sponsors are really important, and have certainly facilitated a couple of the different moves that I've been able to make within my career. And then, just relying on just good people around you to help support, in terms of on-the-job learning and experience. About my background.
Great. Thank you so much, Kylie. And look, yes, you pointed out some great things. If you're not sure where to go in your career, where you fit, I think great advice, for a generalist degree, a business degree can take you lots of places and give you loads of different. You wouldn't believe it, I've just got a delivery guy at the door. I've left a note on the door. So hopefully they'll leave the package there. So look, while I answer the door, Laurie, would you mind moving on to and tell us your story, please?
No problem at all.
Won't be a moment.
So with joining Orica 12 years ago, I've obviously had a career before Orica in mining and construction, in leadership roles. And I was actually brought into Orica for my leadership experience at the time. Back then there was a bit of a gap in the business as well, and there was I had a great opportunity with a very supportive manager and open-minded manager at the time that saw that the business needed people from outside in those leadership roles. So taking a big leap of faith and moving from Perth to Queensland in a completely new industry, or product line, I should say, was probably one of the best opportunities I ever undertook. One of the favourable things in looking at the company at the time was that they had a massive footprint, and that probably gave me the thought process and confidence to take a leap of faith as well. So moving across in 4 years in Queensland, that's when I was given opportunities to develop in training. I did the business was able to sponsor me into a diploma of management, which is just like a 1-year degree. And that then started to open my probably the thought process of what I should be doing. I never really had thought about doing an undergrad or a master's at that time, even though I was heavily exposed to it with my family. Most of my family have done masters or MBAs or PhDs. There was nothing ever thought I would undertake. And then getting the opportunity to move Mongolia, I switched line managers by undertaking that. They gave me probably the breeding ground of really pushing me in that direction and saying, have you ever thought about doing, and at that time, that was probably 8 years ago, have I ever thought about doing an MBA? And it never crossed my mind, but when I was lucky enough to have a reporting manager that really saw that opportunity, if I wanted to develop my career. At that time, I think the education system was definitely not as advanced from a remote learning aspect as it is today, which is probably something we'll get into later in the conversation. But that at that time, being in Mongolia and very remote, I think the opportunities were very limited of what I could do. I think the infamous of the learning online and I had reached out to Curtin, and that was just the start of probably that process for him as well. So that sort of got put on hiatus. It wasn't until I moved to Indonesia and I re-engaged that thought process of a secondary education and a master's, and then going back to exactly the same university, I was surprised how quickly online learning had developed, and the opportunities. If you look at how many units are available to choose from when you do masters, I think when I first looked, it was only a handful you could choose any trimester. Now there's, and even this year has even emphasised that. I think you can do pretty much all of it. One of the biggest things I've learned along that process, and so just some background, I'm 6 units into a 12-unit MBA. So I've done a bit of everything online, intensive, and being exposed to the different aspects of it. I think it depends on your learning style of which ones have worked well for me and which ones I haven't. And having the flexibility to do that has been probably one of the key aspects for my development. To go back to some of the aspects to get me to do my master's, if I look at 12 years with Orica, I've had 12 line managers. So there's been a lot of changes in any industry, and some managers I've had for a couple of years and some managers I may get for 6 months. So it's really about taking that ownership. At some point, I had to have that realization. My personal development has to be driven personally from myself. I really attached to individual managers really well, but then they would quickly disappear into other aspects of the business. I think if I look back to my original manager, I'm really lucky that they're still in the business, and I look at them as a mentor even today. And I know we talked about sponsorship, sponsors and mentors. It's one thing that I really thrive on, is being able to latch onto a mentor, and it's something I've tried to instill in my leadership style. And anyone I've been a mentor for myself, I've probably just been drawn to them because they've got that, they're open to that aspect of learning. And if you come across that way, I think there may have been a question earlier on about how do you find a sponsor or how you find a mentor. I think they find you if you're open to that environment. If you're really, as Annie said before, wanting to learn, looking for opportunities, probably accepting a lot more projects than you can handle at times. And that really drags you into those key leaders and mentors that you find out through the industry. And mentors don't always come in the form of they're inside your organisation. There can be definitely other people from outside the organisation as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laurie. Yeah, some great points there. And this theme about, mentoring and sponsorship, it just comes through so strongly from all speakers. But also I like that you say, I mean, you had a number of different managers, and, you can't rely on one manager to, for your career. Taking that ownership yourself and, deciding where you want to go with the help of a sponsor and a mentor. It's some guidance there, but taking that ownership, I think, is so important to get where you're going, where you want to go. Yeah. Wonderful. So look, I've got a couple of questions just for each speaker, and then we'll go to the audience questions. And I'll start with you, Annie. You've travelled a lot, you've worked a lot in different countries with different languages and cultures. What has this experience taught you, and what sort of learning barriers have you faced? And Laurie and Kylie can also add their comments to this as well. So we'll start with you, Annie.
Okay. It's a really good question. I think the key thing for me, like you can all notice, English is not my first language. So I remember when I arrived in New Caledonia is French, but there was a big team of Aussie and I couldn't understand the Australian accent. And the first thing I had learned English in Canada with the American accent. I really had, for me, the barrier for me was I can't understand, but I'm in charge of things. I have to say I don't understand. I have to admit they have to re-explain to me so we can move forward for that. So that was a big one, the language. Then I remember my first written report, someone told me, like, it looks like a school report from a kid, and then you have to not be insulted by that. I say, look, it's the first time I'm writing a report in that language technically. And you just have to be humble about it and admit that you don't know everything. And also another key thing is, as I think I mentioned it, like you have to adapt when you travel a lot. And you have to be courageous enough to admit that the way you think things should be done is not necessarily the right way for the audience.
Yes, fantastic. Kylie or Laurie, do you have anything to add about your experiences?
I think I may have touched on it already, but definitely the challenges for me for traveling was geographical. And these COVID has definitely made universities take that next leap, even though they were already on that roadmap to change. And I think we've probably, my thought of online learning was probably, oh, that's not a real degree or it's not real study. But it's very intensive as well. The lecturers, that you still have weekly lecturers that are live. That is very interactive. It's very classroom based that's being brought online. Obviously, you'll get some professors that are really well rehearsed in it, and others are just new to it, just as students are as well. So, yeah, that's definitely was a challenge back in the day, but that's progressed really well. And I think what Annie said at first, the feedback is quite blunt from professors and teachers, and that's hard to take on board. But the more that you really absorb that, I definitely, the first couple of units was pretty hard. The only other thing I would say that was really challenging was I probably did the wrong unit first. I chose a unit I wasn't very familiar with economics. That was a massive challenge, because not only was I learning how to study again and how to use a university IT system, which everyone will find complicated. I probably chose a subject that I wasn't very familiar with. So that would be a number one key point for me, is choose something that looks familiar. If it's around leadership, or if you're a finance person, choose a finance unit first up. Everything else will flow after that.
Okay. Yes, and some of those sort of cultural and language barriers that you faced, Annie, I think it's a great example and a reminder to us when we're leading diverse teams around learning and development, that, you know, just sometimes it just might take a little bit of patience. People have got the capability, but, you know, that you do need to get accustomed to the local environment, the local culture. You know, people particularly coming overseas to work in Australia and leading those teams. I know people also, you know, still saying after being here for years, you know, I still can't get that Australian sense of humour. You know, they're sort of left out of the jokes because, you know, it can be, you know, quite complex. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Kylie, did you have any other comments to add to that?
You know, I haven't taken on any further formal education, or, you know, in terms of, if I was to say, should I probably could, but for me, probably personally, the barrier is more around time and juggling, you know, the personal sort of, you know, life balance really is probably would be the barrier that I would have at the moment as to why I wouldn't proceed down that path, or why I haven't done anything at this point in that formal space. Yeah.
Okay. So look, Julian, I might revert to you and see if we've got some questions from the audience.
We sure do, Diane. Thanks.
Great. Okay.
So this one's from Rhiannon Mathers. Is there a right time to go after getting an MBA? Is it worth getting it early in your career or waiting until you're ready for leadership roles?
Good question. I'll open that to the panel.
I'm happy to say something. I wanted to do one when I started my career, and I took the decision to go overseas and work and do other things. And as Laurie said, in those years was not really good online, so I didn't do it. And like Kylie, I don't have the time to do it when I would like to do it, because I have a 3.5-year-old and a full-time job that's really demanding. I'm linked with productions. I'm on call all the time. And I think if it's in your mind and you would like to do it as early as possible when you have more time.
Okay. Kylie,
but I think I would also probably suggest that make sure you've got some experience or some practical experience behind you as well, because you'll probably get more out of it after having had some, you know, not that I've done, but from what I think you benefit from a little bit of working experience, so you can draw on that, because then, you know, you take that in as part of your learning. And I think, Laurie, that's probably fair to say.
Yeah. Oh,
find that?
it's the number one question I've probably been asked around the water cooler over the last 3 months since they've known that we're doing this. And I know that we all have different sort of viewpoints on it. So it's really interesting when we start talking about it. And I find, for me, like, I'm 40 now, I probably wish I was 35, but that's still fair way on in my career. So for me, I'm a big believer on having that experience behind you. And what an MBA then does, it really instills a lot of theory processes that, or then guides you in the next direction as that step up. I completely agree with Danny. Time is a massive factor. When you become 35 or 40, you've probably got a couple of kids, and there's a whole nother challenge ahead of you as well. In a lot of units, I'm able to tell who's coming straight out of uni and study straight into an MBA. And I think they probably struggle a little bit because a master's in business administration is a lot of it is about drawing from your experience, talking to line managers, really that guides you a lot through a lot of the units as well. So they definitely have a different perspective, I guess. And I reckon they would come out of it learning something different than we would. Not that it's wrong, but I've gained a lot from having that experience behind me. And that's probably given me a lot more confidence to do it as well. Because I didn't have that undergrad as well. If I had 3 engineering degrees and all this, I may have been very confident to continue on to do a master's. Having a lot of leadership experience behind me has definitely, made me a lot more confident in undertaking it for sure. So I think it's a 2-prong answer, isn't it? So everyone's got a different answer on that one. So.
Yeah. And look, I'd love to throw my 2 cents worth in. I did similar to you, Laurie. I didn't do an undergrad, but did a postgrad when I was about 36, and had 2 young children under at the age of 5. Took on a new national HR management role for the country, and was studying part-time for 2 years. And it really tested me. It pushed me to the limits. But it was one of the most rewarding experiences. And I found, having a number of years work experience under my belt already, the richness of doing a postgrad or a master's was so much better because you could bring live experiences to it and examples. So I'd be on that side of the ledger, doing it a little bit later.
Yeah. So you got the whole broad spectrum, and then just to add, so if I taught, my mum did her MBA when she was 55. So you can do them very young, you can do them very old. So I don't think you're really limited on it. I think it's really down to what suits your lifestyle at the time, if you got the opportunity, isn't it?
Absolutely, when it's right for you. Terrific. Okay, Julian, next question, please.
Yes, so this one is from Catherine Mora. I know that getting a sponsor is important. How do you suggest doing that when you join a new company?
Good question.
I'd like to answer that one.
Yeah.
What about you, Kylie?
It's a good question, because trying to navigate your way around. It's been a while since I've joined a new company, because, as I said, I've now been there for for a little while. But if I look around watching people that have joined, I think the biggest piece of advice that I did a mentoring program and had a professional sort of mentor, and that was really valuable. And I hadn't really considered the whole sponsor thing, until sort of recent years. And it's interesting, because you look around and actually you'll naturally have some sponsors that develop. So I'm trying to think about how you go about it in a new organisation, other than to just simply, look for somebody that, is in a senior role that, you can work out if you can find a way to connect with them. But again, you have to take the initiative and seek those people out. It's not, you can't just ask people to, put your hand up, who wants to be my sponsor. It doesn't quite work like that. But you know, you have to navigate your way through, you know, who's who in the zoo and in your organisation. But I think people naturally just sort of, you'll start to see, and either talking through, you know, with a few different people, but if nothing else, ask your direct line manager, because they will probably more than likely have a few ideas for you and might be able to facilitate that reach out, and see if something like that can, you know, help smooth the way.
Great advice. Thanks, Kylie. Annie or Laurie?
Yeah, really in line with Kylie. I think when it's a new company, you still need to build your network within that company, and go, because it needs to come from you going to ask someone. So what Kylie said, asking your line manager first, but you still have to prove yourself before someone will sponsor you. So it's not going to happen in the first 6 months of joining a new company. For myself, my example, the person I asked was the site manager when I was a superintendent. And then it was 4 years later, he was a VP role. And then I asked him, but you really need to build that network first and prove what you're capable of, so people can sponsor for you.
Absolutely. And I think there's a big difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And quite often a mentor will then become a sponsor.
True.
But a good sponsor has influence among other people. And so it's very important to, and a sponsor usually chooses you. You don't necessarily choose them, that you choose the mentor and ask mentors, and they often develop into a sponsor because then they understand your talents, capabilities, and can advocate for you.
Yeah, that's so true. I heard, like, I went to a webinar with Women in Engineering recently, and there was a woman on the panel. She said, a mentor talks with you, a sponsor talks about you. And it's
Absolutely.
Really
perfect. Yeah. Julian, any more questions?
Yeah. Yep, we've got a lot more. This one's from Louise Wine. It's for Kylie. How did you market your transferable skills? Did you have to work hard to get people to recognise that your non-mining experience was valuable?
Great question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to say I was probably fairly naive when I first tried to broach the subject within the organisation, to say, you know, I'd like to see what our Orica mining, you know, brothers and sisters do, coming from a non-mining background. But once I had a couple of discussions with the somebody from the HR team that I got put in contact with, that just helped me educate myself around the mining side of the business, how it was structured, what does the sales role look like inside Orica Mining as opposed to what I was used to. From there, I was able to try and find all the commonality that exists. And fundamentally, it was around account management, customer management, relationship building, and you know, just the key skills that go with that type of role. So then, practical examples of how you've, you know, managed and solved issues and challenges. It's no different to any other sort of, you know, interview, I suppose, trying to work out how to make it relatable to the new side of business that I was trying to approach. But, you know, I have to, and a little bit to what Laurie said a bit earlier, I have to take my hat off to, you know, the manager that hired me was probably taking a risk. So, because it was quite a different transition. So I was fortunate that he obviously saw something, and that was, you know, there's also that element of it as well, that they had to have some confidence that I could do that. But I have to say that a little bit of background was because Orica and Yates was connected, there was a couple of you know, sort of courses that operated within our businesses and people from the different business units could go on those courses, and they were around leadership and skills building and things like that. So I think I'd also been able to sort of pave my way a little bit, in that there were some people from the mining side of the business that were aware that I was interested in a transition. So I'd also done a little bit of background work there, that they knew a little bit about me, had seen me in those type of, you know, courses, and understood a little bit about how, you know, how I came across and maybe how I'd end up on the marketing side.
Sounds like you used your people skills there to, Kylie, to network and build relationships, talk to people. Yeah. And, you know, it'd be great to see more organisations open up rather than keeping, you know, quite closed on, you know, we want someone from this particular industry, because there's so much value that people can bring in different perspectives from across different industries. And you're a great example of that. So wonderful. Okay. Does anyone else have any, sorry, I'll go back to you, Julian, and sounds like you've got a lot of questions there.
Yep, this one's from Rachel Malin. That's for Laurie. Did you choose your MBA based on the specific school or the flexibility it gave you to study online?
Yeah, great question. At first I was probably a little bit biased in the school I chose. I obviously at Curtin University, only because I knew a lot of friends and family had already done that. And that's probably what opened up the confidence of engaging them. I had looked at a few others at the time, but I focused on Curtin solely. At the time, it was solely on based how much could I do online, because I was overseas at the time and I didn't know when I would return. I actually even looked, could I undertake at least 75% of it online? And at the time, that was thereabouts. I think that's even more now. And I was even willing to do an intensive unit or two at the end. So yeah, that was a massive driver for me, the flexibility of the online learning. And the more I got through and the more my circumstances changed, that's definitely helped. So I can do intensive courses now. I can stay fully online with it. Yeah, that was a #1 driver for me.
Thanks. Thanks, Laurie. Julian, any more?
Yep, another one from Louise for Laurie and Annie. What have you found most applicable from the content of the MBA to your leadership roles? And did you find the content was leading edge, or did you feel your worked experience was more valuable in preparing you for leadership?
Do you want to answer, Laurie, since you're doing an MBA?
I think there's a couple questions in that, wasn't there?
There is.
Yeah, there's a couple of parts to it, yep. First part, what have you found most applicable from the content of the MBA to your leadership role?
Most applicable? Well, I'm majoring in leadership. When I chose my units, and there's a lot of units to choose from, I actually uninvertedly realised I chose units that would major in leadership. So what have I found most relevant is, with my experience that comes behind it, it's really just to find a lot of theory based around it to guide me, okay, this is the right way to do it, or maybe I've been approaching that wrong. If you look at the unit I'm undertaking now, Fundamentals of Leadership, I probably, it's definitely, you know, probably my confidence as a leader is readjusted and saying, you know, there's other ways to approach things, not just the experience I've got. You know, if otherwise I'm just repeating the same thing over and over again. So being able to, you know, be open-minded about adjusting things, because with so much experience behind me as a leader, it's easy to just copy paste. So undertaking that study right now lets me be a bit more flexible and adjust leadership styles. And I know of several people that have done MBAs, and people have made comments how they weren't aware that they were doing an MBA at the time, but they really noticed their leadership style changed during that period. So it was quite interesting when I reflected on that. Someone just mentioned that to me a few weeks ago, and how my leadership style is changing because of the study I'm undertaking. So.
Okay.
Do we have any more?
Yeah, this is.
Hopefully that answered the question. I think there was a second part to that question. Then.
I think you kind of answered it, Laurie, in that. Just about, did you find the content was leading edge, or did you think your work experience was more valuable? Yeah. Leading
edge. I'd probably. I don't think there was anything groundbreaking that was like, oh my God, that's the way to do it. I didn't really find that. If I was undertaking this in my early 20s, that may have been the case. but I don't think so with me. Yeah.
Actually, just while you're still talking there, Laurie, how do you think completing your MBA will change your career? This is from Tracy Warrener.
Yeah, and I think this relates to the topic of the heading of this conversation is, will it kickstart my career? My answer to that is, I don't believe it will kickstart my career, but what it will do is fundamentally change my career. It gives me a lot more flexibility going forward. With 12 years in the organisation, I've obviously progressed through a normal life cycle of role after role and progressed my way through the business. But if you actually looked and I wanted to leave the organisation, I would struggle to fall into a very similar role. So without a master's or an engineering degree or anything like that under me. So because then I would be competing with other people that had that experience and also a master's behind them. So it's definitely going to help me progress my career, not just through the current organisation, but through others as well. Yeah, I think it's really important.
Thanks, Laurie.
And I think
this one's, sorry, Diane. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there, because as you mentioned earlier, Laurie, you hadn't done an undergraduate. So for this point in your career, you know, quite important for you to have that qualification behind you and a lot of validation, whereas Annie and Kylie did your undergraduates, and your experience over the years has, you know, you've been able to build your careers based on those foundations, which still stand you in good stead today. And I suppose what we're also seeing is some of the, you know, barriers, say particularly with you, Annie, with young children, you know, some women facing those barriers, taking on further education with young children, and you know, finding time literally when you're working to do that. So I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit, Annie, what some of the things you might think about there with the flexibility now of online learning?
Yeah, I think for me, like, as Laurie said, like, you go to a normal progression, and I think you get to a stage that you're at the limit of your skills. Like, if I continue where I am, the next stage is site manager. Yeah, perhaps, maybe. But after that, it's a VP level. I think you really need to have a better business understanding of the broad organization. So you probably need some type of formal education. If it's not an MBA, at least some kind of, you can do some of the units to at least have that knowledge. Some people do it without it. I think I would probably feel uncomfortable, because it's a massive step when you get to a VP level. You're already like quite challenged, and if on top of that you don't have to understand what people are talking about around you, and I think
that's an important point. I mean, you know, for any study, any professional development, you need to think about your career pathway and where you're going. You know, what do I want? Where am I heading? And what skills and qualifications do I need to get there? So, yeah, I think really good point, Annie. Okay, sorry, any last questions? Julian, we might have time for one more.
Yep, this is a really good one from Mark. It's for all the panellists. Do you think there are alternative higher education programs that might also fast track your career rather than an MBA? Something like other master's programs, short courses, etc.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think everyone still holds an MBA up. If somebody's got an MBA, there's certainly an element of, well, that really ticks the box. I think, you know, if you're looking through people's, you know, there is definitely different ways to probably still get that level of knowledge, and whether you do it through your own self-education online, or whether you take some short courses, I think you can still probably achieve the educational output, but if it doesn't proceed just ticking the box, certainly if you want to get into a little bit what you were saying, Annie, you know, if you want to get into those sort of senior executive roles and you don't have something that gives you that, that piece of paper that, you know, really rounds out any of your, because if your undergraduate is quite a defined, you know, technical based undergraduate, then yes, an MBA then rounds out your sort of senior commercial, you know, business experience. So it really just depends where you've come from, but it's certainly not. I don't see it as being essential. It's certainly not. It's not holding. You know, I keep asking that question a little bit around the people that have been my managers in recent years, and I don't get the impression that it's an absolute requirement. But that's more because maybe my education is a little bit more general in terms of a general business degree from way back when. Yeah, so it's an interesting question. It's not a straightforward answer.
No, it's a really different, and I agree with you. Like, there's other way to get the knowledge, and I think it depends on the industry or the company as well. Because the other businesses I worked before Orica, I know Orica, there's some executives that don't have, but they learn other way. And I think it depends what you're passionate about and what you want. Like, different stage of your career, you may be interested in a different thing, and you may do short courses on different programs depending what you want to do.
Yeah. Laurie, any final words?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think the silver bullet is we keep there's a few people referring to that, you know, fast track. What's the quick and easy way out of this? And there's probably not. It's, you know, it comes with a lot of experience and just constantly learning, like LinkedIn learning modules that always are available. There's so many different platforms, and it depends on individuals and where they are at inside a organisation or any time in their career. And I always, anyone that comes to me and says, should I undertake this sort of study or this, or should I take this role, is always a really interesting one. I always tell them to think the step ahead. So if you take this role, if you do this study, where will that then lead me into? Because otherwise you can end up at a dead end very quickly if you just have that short-term view. So if I undertake an MBA, it wasn't just about having an MBA and having it. What was I wanting to achieve after that point? And that then instilled, was I making the right decision? If I want to do short courses, what is the outcome I want to achieve after doing those short courses or other learning modules? Is it just to have the piece of paper, or is it to have the piece of paper because that can get me that job, because those position descriptions say I must need that? So I always think a step ahead, and I think that sort of has guided me a lot and a lot of other people that I've spoken to.
Wonderful. Great. Well, I think that's a terrific way to wrap up our segment. And look, yes, your input today. Thank you so much, Annie, Kylie, Laurie, for sharing your personal experiences and your thoughts around this important topic, your journeys, the importance of sponsors and mentors, you know, the plethora of learning opportunities out there on the job, experiential learning, international opportunities of travelling overseas culturally and from a diversity perspective, and then formal education, the timing. It's a very individual question for everybody. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. We really, really appreciate your valuable time today. I'd also like to thank Pauline Sullivan and Therese Sonfeld and Brenda Denverston from Orica, who've been really instrumental in helping us bring this together today. And of course, all our fabulous volunteers behind the scenes, Sharon Grosvenor and Julian Butenshaw. Thank you so much as part of the NAWO team. And a huge thank you to Orica for hosting today. And by way of thanks, traditionally we would give out a bottle of wine or a book to thank you, but what we're doing now is we're donating to a number of causes that do some fabulous work championing women. So thank you again, and your contribution is very warmly received. So we'd love you to send us your feedback. We'll be sending out a text message or an email shortly with the survey link. We really appreciate your feedback to help us continue improving our webinars and what you thought about today's topic and the tips you got out of it. So please send us your feedback. And just finally, be part of the conversation. We've got a great LinkedIn group. Follow us on Twitter. Also, visit our website. This recording will be available again, so you can share it with your colleagues. And visit the website. There's loads of resources, and you can keep up to date on our next webinars. Always great topics of interest that in. So thank you again to our very special speakers, Annie, Kylie and Laurie. We really appreciate your time today and very interesting input and conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us, and safe journey.
Thanks, Diane.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.